I think we'll continue to see a healthy market. Will we see the 20, 25, 30% increases that we saw last year? I think you can make an argument that it won't be that, but I think it'll still be above perhaps what we were seeing as a typical increase in property value over the past few years.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odom and Steven Silverman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odom, along with Steven Silverman. Steven, we've got a special guest today.
We certainly do, and it's very timely because I just read an article that the property values in Tampa Bay have gone up probably the highest in the country % year over year. And it's going to have a great impact on investors.
Yeah, I mean, we occasionally will get Mr. Bob Henriquez, who's the property appraiser for Hillsborough County, to come in and talk to us, chat with us about what's going on. So we're excited to have him in on the show and what he has to say to us about what's happening now currently. We are obviously in the middle of the tax budget planning stage right now in government, and there's going to be a lot of teeth gnashing over these additional funds because property values have gone up so much, what they're going to do with those things. So as we say to all of our listeners, get involved. You can't complain if you're sitting from the peanut gallery. You need to get involved and make sure that your tax dollars are being spent wisely. Steven, we like reviews.
We certainly do. And if you listen to the podcast and you give us a review, it really helps because our goal is to get well-qualified and interesting guests, and these guests pay attention to what people think of the podcast. So if you can leave us a review, it helps us all just be a much better podcast and get better guests. Absolutely.
Wanted to give a shout out to Martin. Martin left us a review on Apple iTunes and said, relevant and timely REI insights in Florida. He says, my name is Martin, and I began investing in Florida real estate in early 2020 and have been fortunate enough to get into several properties before the current increases in prices. It's challenging for me since I live and work in Dubai. Fortunately, Eric and Steven do a great job interviewing guests who are also experts and actively involved in Florida real estate. Without the content put out by the Invest Florida Show, as well as our broker, property manager, Kim Meredith, Hampton, who would make a great guest, by the way, and Hampton Real Estate, I wouldn't have made the jump into investing in Central Florida. Thanks again for all of the great content and guests, and I look forward to spending many more hours listening. Martin, that's a very kind review. It definitely helps us too when you leave reviews like this for our guests, and we work very hard at producing this show. And it is a challenge to get the right type of guests for you that are going to add impact and be meaningful for you that might be investing here in Florida or remotely like Dubai or the UK, which we have a lot of investors from as well. So that's much appreciated, Martin. If you've not done so already, please go to either the iTunes store or to our Facebook page or someplace and leave us a review. We'll definitely read it out and show our appreciation for you taking the time to do that. Steven, great guest, talking what's going on with property appraiser and what's happening with taxes and values, or anything else you want to talk about. Oh, we want to introduce him. We haven't properly introduced him yet.
No, we can do that right now.
Why don't we go ahead and introduce him then?
So today we have with us Bob, Coach Henriquez. Bob is the Hillsborough County property appraiser. He was elected in 2012. But Bob's history with Tampa goes back a long way. He's fifth generation born in Tampa. And his great-grandfather, Enrique, was actually the last mayor of West Tampa. Bob has served the community in all kinds of capacities. He's known as Coach because of his help in coaching of teams, and he's been all types of community outreach and help programs. And He's our property appraiser, and he cares about Tampa. So we're fortunate to have him, and we look forward to what he has to tell us about what's going on because it's very timely. Bob, welcome to the Invest Florida show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon.
Yeah, Bob, we really appreciate you taking the time and to talk to us about what's going on in your world. I know there's never a good time for you. I mean, you're right now. I think you're just getting done with the issues with the clerk of the court and passing on all the information on working with the tax assessor's department of delinquent properties and communicating with them. And so we know you're busy. It's always been busy, but we definitely appreciate the time that you are investing us with us today.
Yeah, and Bob, it's been 3 years since you were with us.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been that long. Well, we had this little pandemic thing that went on and over the last couple of years, so maybe that's part of the reason we haven't gotten together. But I appreciate this opportunity. Anytime that I can, get information out to the property owners of Hillsborough County, I take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, and we're going to talk specifically about Hillsborough County, but because we have listeners from all over the state, I think a lot of this can be applied to the property appraisers that are the investors that are dealing with, whether it be Levy County or Broward County. So a lot of it's going to be the same. Not all is going to be the same because you're dealing with different municipalities, but it's still going to be similar types of issues that we're dealing with today. And namely is the crazy increases in property rates. And why don't you start there and kind of give us an overview of what's happening in the market?
Yeah, clearly here in Hillsborough County, or Tampa Bay, as we've become fond of calling it, we've seen, incredible rise in property values over the last year in particular, the last couple of years. But really it can be extrapolated statewide to a large extent. The numbers are similar in larger counties, and we're seeing it down to the medium-sized and even smaller counties that have seen increases this year as well. We all know that the market's very healthy. And it has been really since 2013, coming out of the Great Recession. We've had 6.5 to close to 10% increase in overall property value, and that's all property types in Hillsborough County in any given year. What we're seeing this year is an order of magnitude that I don't think that anyone's ever seen, and which we're seeing in some cases 20-25% or more. I've even seen articles up to 32% increase in certain properties, in Hillsborough County in terms of overall value. So, and the trend continues. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about what's happening with the increase in interest rates and what effect that's having on the market. But certainly the market continues to be very, very strong.
So, Bob, can you, for our listeners, just give a quick overview on what exactly your process is in doing the assessments and how your whole department works?
Yeah, the property tax process, and I can give it in kind of a thumbnail sketch. And keep in mind for your listeners that are familiar with how appraisers value property. And if you look at it on the micro level, say a fee appraiser that you have come do an appraisal for a home that you're buying or selling, or whatever property that you may be buying or selling, there are basically three approaches to value. The sales comparison approach that you're going to use for the most part in residential, the cost approach, which is the cost of building something new minus depreciation on a piece of property, and then add in the land value, and that gives you a value of the property. Or the income approach, which is for income-producing properties, the commercial properties that produce income, and there's a expected amount of income that an owner would have, and then you can extrapolate that out to come up with the value of the property, what somebody would pay for it, basically. We use those same approaches in mass appraisal at our office that fee appraisers use. The difference is, again, there's 550,000 properties in Hillsborough County. We're using a mass appraisal approach, which is largely computer-driven, putting a lot of information into, not to get too technical for the purposes of this. But really our job is to determine the assessed value of all of the property in Hillsborough County. Again, 550,000 or so properties. That's all property types. And then determine the exemptions that whether or not the people apply for, whether they qualify for those as well. That's really our job. And once we come up with that information, we pass that along to the taxing authorities, like the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, the various Aviation Authority, Port Authority, Children's Board, School Board. They're the folks that actually set the millage rates or the tax rates that ultimately, through that calculation, based on the revenue that they need to do their business, ends up being your tax bill. Once they figure out what those tax rates are, they're in the process of doing that, or they're coming up with their budgets right now. Then they send the information back to us, and we send out the trim notice of proposed taxes, notifying property owners of the value that we've come up with and basically what their proposed taxes would be based on the millage rate as it was the previous year. And that starts off an important 25 days in which property owners can agree or disagree. I don't know if they agree, maybe we don't hear from them, but if they disagree with their value or an exemption denial, they can file a value adjustment board petition with us. That starts again in August. We send out the trim notice, and there's a 25-day period, hence into September, for them to file those applications. To give you an idea, we may have anywhere from 1,800 to 3,000 or so of those out of, again, over 500,000 properties in Hillsborough County in any given year. Some of our larger counties in the state have, some place like Miami-Dade might have 10 times that. But once we get those, then we start working those with the property owners, and we work through that process for folks, again, that are appealing their value. The tax bills will go out in November for the tax collector, and then they'll collect that money, it's due by March 30th, and then the tax revenue that's collected goes back to the taxing authorities to do their business. So that's basically the thumbnail process. Obviously, it's more involved than all that, but that kind of gives you an idea of how it actually works.
Now, typically, homeowners or property owners will get their trim notice, and they look at it and they say, well, it comes at $300,000, but the reality is my situation, my house is really worth $360,000. Can you talk a little bit about why you're seeing that variation in what actual market value is and what assessed value is on the trim notice?
Sure. Well, a couple things. First of all, unfortunately, so many property owners don't read it because it says it's not a bill, right? So I would encourage anyone that's listening, if you own property in Florida or Hillsborough County, to read your trim notice, because it really is everything. I like to say, being a Tampa native and of Hispanic descent, that the paella that ends up being your tax bill, everything's in there. So there's a couple reasons that the sale price of a property, and let's just talk about, say, residential property right now, may be different than our value. First off, remember that we are in a mass appraisal world, so the neighborhoods that we are gathering like properties are much larger than, say, a fee appraiser would, where they're doing a much granular assessment of the property. So if they pick three comparables within a neighborhood, they're really digging into, okay, this house has granite countertops and this one has a pool and this one doesn't. And ours are a little bit more, 30,000 foot level, using base rates and raw square footage. So that accounts a little bit for the differences that we may not know. It's not quite as granular, if that makes sense. The other thing is, remember that we have to set the value based on, I should have said this before, based to make it apples to apples for all the property owners. There's a date of assessment, which is January 1st. That's our magic date. So the value that you receive in your assessment on the trim notice in August of a given year is based on January 1st of that year. So it's 8 months, almost 9 months later. So the market changes, certainly. And so it may have gone up or down a percentage during that period of time in terms of what the sales are. So depending on whether you're selling in the first quarter or the third quarter or fourth quarter of a year, the values may change a little bit in terms of, and then once again, we'll look at those sales for the following January 1st. So that's part of it as well. And the other part is that part of what goes into a sale price is not necessarily value of the property. So when you sell a home for $380,000, it may only be, the value of the property may only be $315,000 or $300,000 or some percentage of it, because you have certain parts of it that, realtor fees and different things that go on top of that are, we call costs of sale, that should be backed out of the actual value of the home. So those are some of the factors that are involved in that. And so, again, we're historians. There's cost of sale and things that need to be backed out. And again, because of the fact we're using a much larger, sort of more of a broad brush because we're in this mass appraisal world, all of those things kind of account for the fact that the home on any given day may be selling for more than the trim notice you receive in August.
And once somebody gets the trim notice, if they're not happy with, or they want to at least talk to someone about it, there's a certain window, isn't there, that they can
It's a pretty
challenge.
tight window, too, I believe.
Yeah, well, the reality is we're putting information into the system, and we update that information all year long. So it's a working role. And not that folks necessarily are going to look in March or April and call us about what their assessment's going to be, on the trim notice in August. But somewhere around June, it's pretty much settled into what it's going to be. We encourage folks to do what we call an administrative review. So once they receive their trim notice, or somewhere around the time trim notices are about to go out, if they go online and they say, gosh, that number just doesn't seem right to me, we encourage them to give us a call, come by our office, either downtown, our main office, or one of our branch offices, send us an email, whatever it may be, and we'll try to work through it and see what their concerns are. That's the preferable way, obviously, rather than them filing a value adjustment board claim, or a petition. But the sort of official way to do it, again, is you receive your trim notice, you look at the value and go, but that just doesn't make sense to me. Or maybe you applied for an exemption that was denied. Is at that point you have a 25-day window to actually file a value adjustment board petition. Now, we're going to take that and then go from sort of this mass appraisal world into more of a fee appraisal approach, and individually go back and take a look at these and see what merit they have, work with the property owners if possible. That's why probably 80 to 85% in any given year of value adjustment board petitions are withdrawn before they ever go any further towards actually having a value adjustment board meeting. But I would encourage folks to read those trim notices, and particularly in a year like this, we expect that folks are going to be, particularly if you're new construction, have purchased a property in the last year, whether it be commercial or industrial or residential, you're going to see the brunt of the increases in property value. Because, again, most homesteaded properties are capped based on the Save Our Homes cap. So, get with us. We're going to work with you as best we can, especially in an extraordinary year like this year. And if we have to go all the way through the board of adjustment process, we will. The other redress is if they're not satisfied there, is to go to circuit court, and we try to work our way through it so we don't have too many of those cases in any given year.
Yeah, especially I guess in a year like this where like the cap rates have gone so low, commercial
Right.
property owners are going to see tremendous jumps in property value, and I'm just curious if that would proportionally, I guess it should translate into proportionately higher taxes.
It does. Remember, even with non-home base, you still have the 10% cap. So year over year, some properties have seen that, but they're still protected over the course of time if you have a commercial piece. But if there have been something like 70,000 transactions of one type or another over the last year. So if you bought a new office building, bought a shopping center, apartment building, whatever it may be in the commercial world, if you purchased a new home or you have new construction, you're going to see a significant rise. Particularly if you bought a piece of property that's been capped for a long period of time, a residential piece of property, that your new tax bill is going to be significantly higher than the previous owner. Because remember, if you purchase in a given year, you're basically taking over the homestead or the tax bill for the previous owner for the remainder of that year. The following year is when you can file for homestead and the cap resets, and you pay the full fair market value, or based on the full fair market value minus any exemptions that you have. So you're absolutely right. And the other thing that we're seeing is that folks that are seeing these kinds of increases are then, of course, passing it through to their renters, and that's why we're seeing rental rates going up at a rate that's amongst the highest in the country. Because whether it be your tenant in a commercial building or a residential property, you have generally those things are pass-throughs.
Yeah, and this is important, and I think for folks coming from outside the area, which we're having massive migration right now. Post-COVID, it was put on hold for a while, and then of course some of the folks, I'm speculating, but there's some fact to back that up, some data to back it up, that a lot of folks were very unhappy with the way COVID was handled where they came from, and decided that now was the time to try to get an escape in case something like that happened again. And so we had bottled up demand essentially for 2 years. And then we had the COVID situation hit and had some additional folks that say, you know what, don't like the way it was handled at home, and I like the way Florida handled it better. And so they started to move here. But when they come down here, they don't necessarily understand that Save Our Home cap. So if you could give us sort of a 30,000 foot overview, it could be really shocking to people, because if they're buying a home and they're looking at that value on the previous year and they buy it, and then all of a sudden they're realizing that they don't realize until they get the trim notice, it could be 18 months later, that basically has gone away. That cap's gone away, and now their assessment's significantly higher. So if you give us kind of a 10,000 foot view of that, it'd be much appreciated.
Absolutely. And we are seeing, just to touch on the migration point, and I think it's a combination of a number of things. I mean, the COVID restrictions, I think, were part of it. But, frankly, things that draw people to Florida are the things that have always drawn people to Florida. At least in theory, the more affordable homes, lower taxes, and this is what's interesting about this, is that all of the things that have drawn people to Florida now, all of a sudden they're having to deal with it here. But at least they have Tom Brady and the son and all that stuff to go along with it. But the Save Our Homes cap is going back many, many years. It's kind of difficult to visualize here, but hopefully for your listeners, they can do that. The just or fair market value of the home and the taxable value of the home used to be the same thing. So if your home were worth X amount, whatever it was, let's say back in the day it was worth $125,000, you, minus any exemptions that you had, if you had a $25,000 exemption back in those days for homestead, the taxable value of your home was $100,000. And then in any given year, if the value went up, it basically was a one-for-one relationship in terms of taxable value in your value, right? So if it went up 20% a year, which it wasn't back then, let's say 10%, your taxes would go up 10%. And so you had these pressures on particularly seniors and savers that were, quote, being taxed out of their homes. So the idea of tax caps, and it wasn't just in Florida, it was passed in other places as well, was for homesteaded property, for people's primary residences, that we call homestead here, that they could cap the amount based on the January 1st of the when they set their homestead, the first year as their primary residence, that their taxable value couldn't go up more than 3%, or inflation, whichever is less. Now we know since 2008, inflation's been less than 3%, CPI. And this year, for the first time in my time in office and many years before that, we're going to actually see that, because as we know, primary and secondary inflation added together this year, it's well over 3%. So people that have had their homes capped through homestead exemption, their taxable value will only go up, will go up 3% this year for the most part. Now, what you're speaking to in terms of folks that are kind of shocked, again, if you purchased a home in 2021 and to come along January 1st of 2022, for the rest of during the time in 21 that you purchased it, let's say you bought it in February, between February and December 31st, you were basically taking over the remainder of the tax bill for the previous owner. And the benefits that they had, their exemption. So if the previous owner had been there 10 years, and so their taxable value was significantly lower than the actual just or market value, because again, just or market value since 2013 has been going up 6.5% to 8% by and large each and every year. So your actual just or market value is much higher than your actual taxable value, because you've had it homesteaded. That first year, that new owner is taking advantage of the previous owner's time they've been there and their tax cap. January 1st of 2022, which is what the trim notice will this year that you'll be getting in August is based on, they will then see their just market value and their taxable value reset to be the same thing. And then from there, they will start, and then the process starts all over again. Their taxable value is capped and can't go up more than 3% in any given year, no matter what happens with their just or market value in the year of 2022 that we're in now. So that's what you're exactly right in that people will purchase the property and they say, oh gosh, the previous owner, they only paid $1,800 in taxes last year, and then come trim notice time, their taxes have doubled. And I say, well, how can that be? Well, again, the cap is reset, and they're paying based on the fair market value, as we've assessed it.
So Bob, that's really interesting. I mean, as brokers, we see people buying commercial properties, and they make a fundamental mistake. They take the income, and then they take the expenses, and they say, this is the tax rate, and that's my cap rate, and everybody's happy. But they forget that it's going to adjust in the following year. So can you just go back to what you'd said about the cap on commercial properties, because that's very important for commercial investors.
Yeah, it's not that commercial property, and that includes multifamily, by the way. It's anybody who's not owner occupied. So it's investors that are doing multifamily, retail, industrial, whatever type of properties. Right. They're not naked. They have some protection on increases. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Non-homesteaded properties have a 10% cap, and that came about back in 2000. Well, back in 2008, there was a constitutional amendment that was part of the portability constitutional amendment that we could talk about if you like, that said that commercial properties couldn't go up more than 10% in any given year. So you do have some protection of the cap. Frankly, going back, that was passed in 2008, and then we had the Great Recession, and frankly, people weren't accruing cap because the values were falling. Since 2013, basically, everyone has had increasing property values countywide and for the most part statewide. So they have been protected, but a lot of times the increases in commercial may have been less than that 10% up until just the last couple of years, and we're going to see now that increase is well over 10% for all properties, in addition to commercial properties or non-homesteaded properties. So yes, that can mean if you don't factor that in, if a property has been in the same ownership for the last, say, 10 years, they've been protected by that cap. And when it goes away, it's going to reset to a much higher number.
So just talking policy now, so what we're really looking at this coming year is all these government entities that survive on the taxes. They should be getting a lot more money this year. So, I guess they have to decide if property values are going to decrease or increase, to save some, to put some away.
Yes, that's really where the rubber meets the road as far as the policy goes. We come up with the values and let them make those tough decisions. But to give you an idea, let's say in Hillsborough County, back in 2021, they're just a market value for all of Hillsborough County's properties was somewhere in the neighborhood of $172 billion. Okay? So then their taxable amount, again, once you back out exemptions and caps and what have you, was about $112 billion that was actually taxable. This year, you're going to see last year, again, $172 billion in just market value. 2022 is trending at about almost $222 billion. Wow. So a significant increase in overall value. And of taxable value, about $130.5 billion. So they're going to see, a much larger number this year. You're right. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 16% increase in revenue. Well, percentage of taxable value somewhere, and we're seeing that across the board in all of the taxing authorities, anywhere between 15 and in a couple of cases, Temple Terrace had an Amazon property come online, so there's a little bit higher. But again, that's taxable value. Now, what is that? So you're talking about 15 to 20% increase in taxable value. That equates to somewhere in the neighborhood of about a 15% increase in potential revenues. So $806 million additional revenues this year, and that includes. Now I'm rolling new construction into that as well, into that overall increase. So yes, they have.
So it's an interesting inflection point, because it actually brings us to the next point. Now we're looking at rising interest rates and how, on one hand, that's going to affect the values, or are you seeing that? And then also it might decrease revenues for these government entities in the following
Which
years.
really kind of brings to my question. I could just tie it in that I suppose that we're in the budget planning process right now for these municipalities, And you guys are probably part of your role is helping the municipalities understand the revenue that's going to be coming down the pipe, I would think. So like, just to tie in with what Stephen's talking about with increase in interest rates, are you having discussions with municipalities about how you're projecting interest rates might affect the real estate market in the area?
Well, yes and no. We can give them an idea that we were trending in the market continued to trend up in the first quarter of this year. It's important that we not project in a way that someone might say that we're somehow chasing the numbers for the future. We can speculate. I think anybody can, and we're seeing that the rise in interest rates are causing some kind of a correction in the market. Now, you guys know as well as I do because you're in it that there's still a great deal of cash capital out there. Cash deals haven't slowed down significantly from what I'm hearing. It's the leveraged ones, is right. If you have to go and get a loan, that's going to make the difference. But anecdotally, we are seeing people coming in with lower initial asking prices for residential properties. We're seeing folks that are lowering their initial ask, that maybe they were already on the market before the interest rate rise. Properties that were, 12 offers before noon are taking, a number of days. There's still low inventory out there. So, but I don't know at the end of the day, what does that mean in terms of overall the difference in terms of value increases next year? I think we'll continue to see a healthy market. Will we see the 20, 25, 30% increases that we saw last year? I think you can make an argument that it won't be that, but I think it'll still be above perhaps what we were seeing as a typical increase in property value over the past few years. So we are meeting with them and providing as much information as we can. And then they have to make those decisions. The numbers that I gave you are based on the millage rate staying exactly unchanged from what it was last year. They have the option to raise the millage rate, to lower the millage rate, or to keep it the same. There doesn't seem much appetite for rolling the millage rate back. So clearly they have some investments that they want to make in the various taxing authorities. And, that's for them to make those decisions. And at the same time, frankly, you've got the school board asking for an increased millage rate to match what some of the other neighboring counties have to address some needs that they have there. That'll be an interesting sell. And the additional penny sales tax that the county has determined that they want to put back out to the voters to replace the one that was found unconstitutional more recently. So there's a lot going on out there, but our job is just to provide the numbers to them.
Well, all I can say is we'll be looking forward to, or should I say maybe not looking forward to, getting your annual letter in November.
But just keep in mind,
Yeah, you're just the messenger.
We're just tracking the market.
Yeah. I
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
These are remarkable times in a lot of different ways,
but it's really important what you described, because it's just so that people understand how the mechanism works and how to operate within that environment.
Well, and interestingly, not to interrupt you, but on the trim notice there will be on the back side the notice of all of the various hearings in which the taxing authorities will consider their proposed tax rates or millage rates, and traditionally, those meetings, and I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but they're going to come back to me. Why are you encouraging this? Well, I'm just, we want citizens to be involved in things, and if folks are really concerned, then their best redress would be to educate themselves and show up at those meetings and be part of that process and let their feelings be known as to whether or not they want additional millage rates, or they want to keep them the same, or they want to lower them, or what have you, based on their feelings and what they're having to deal with individually as well.
Okay, well, Bob, thank you very much. If people want to reach out to the property appraiser and just get information or learn a little bit more and educate themselves, where's the best place they can go?
At any given time, you certainly can go check out our website, which is very well received out there. It's one of the better public-facing websites. I'm saying that humbly. At acpafl.org. They can also call us 276-6100, 813-276-6100, or visit one of our offices. We have down at County Center, down at 601 East Kennedy, in downtown Tampa. We have one on Paul's Drive in Brandon. We have a satellite office in Plant City as well as South County in the Hillsborough County Service Center. And Northwest County, we have one as well. So lots of ways that people can get in touch with us, and look forward to those trim notices coming out in August. And, if they have a question, give us a call. Let's try to work through it. We understand what this year is all about, and we're trying to, we don't like folks to think that there's any kind of adversarial relationship here. We're going to work with folks as best we can to make them comfortable with the process we go through, and hopefully at the end of the day, we'll come up with a number that makes sense. We're going to defend our numbers, but that's where we make numbers. So if there's something we've missed, or if there's something we can work with folks on, that's what we want to do. We'd rather not end up in putting them through the ringer of value adjustment board or anything else if we don't have to.
And Bob, I'm going to give you a little bit of a kudos here. Government gets a pretty bad rap, particularly dealing with taxing. I mean, anybody who's had to sit on it and wait for the IRS for the 4-hour waiting period that you have to deal with there just makes people spit nails. You have to basically pay the money, but then you have to wait and get terrible customer service, and then bureaucracy is a mess. Hillsborough County property appraiser is not like that. And we deal with property appraisers all over Central Florida. And you guys have always been responsive, not just to us, but also from us as commercial brokers, but for me, because I'm also an investor in the area, I've always been capable, and I hear this consistently from people across the board, to be able to get questions answered in a considerate fashion at the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser. And that's just not blowing smoke up your skirt. It's for real. I mean, it's a culture that clearly is embedded there, and it's appreciated. So I know that you guys get probably cussed out a lot because people don't like to pay taxes, and you guys are a part of that process. But I just do want to let you know that you do an excellent job in the customer service, and hope to see that going forward.
Well, I appreciate that. It's one of the things that you're right, it's a culture. And we instituted what we call a customer service-centric approach in our office. So we're all customer service agents, and we want to treat folks in the same way that we'd like to be treated. And in turn, for the most part, citizens, once they realize that, or property owners, they treat us the same way, because we're all in this together, right? I'm a taxpayer as well. So, we understand that we could be on the other side of the phone as well. So I appreciate that. And we get cussed out once in a while, but that's okay. But to be honest with you, for the most part, folks, I think feel that when they call our office, they're going to get a live human that's going to be as empathetic as they can be and work with them. We can't solve everybody's problems or issues, but we're going to try the best we can to answer their questions and move forward from there. So I appreciate that, and it's good to know that all the hard work my folks have put in over the years it continues to be recognized in such a manner from not only industry professionals like yourself, but just the everyday citizen that calls.
Yeah. Bob, definitely appreciate your time today, sir. Stephen, anything else before we let Bob go?
Bob, thank you very much. Very enlightening.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Let's not make it 3 years next time.
Okay. And that was Bob Henriquez, property appraiser for Hillsborough County. Stephen, what were your thoughts?
So one of the things that I kept thinking about while we were talking is that, we used to, our clients, they look at sheets where they get the income and expenses, and they see all the expenses, and they do the property tax, and then they figure the cap rate, and they're all happy. But this year in particular, when he's talking about property increases of 25% in some cases in value, it's important to understand how the taxes work and the impact it'll have on the investment.
Yeah, it's one of the things with us that sometimes gets overlooked because we're so much in the weeds with whether it be environmental reports and appraisals and bank situations, and we don't really have that conversation with the client and assume when they're running their analysis they know that the caps that are in place from the previous owner are going to go away, and that can be a bit of a shock to them. And so it's having Bob remind folks of that. And I know we've got a lot of listeners that are from out of the area that might not understand the tax process here. It's a good introduction to some. It's a reminder for others to make sure that you're looking at that, what that tax situation is when on the appraisal side, the assessor's side, when you actually buy that property. Stephen, Bob was a great guest, as always. And if folks want to hear other great guests, how do they go about doing that?
Well, the one place to go is our website, www.investfloridashow.com. Also, download the app so you can listen to the podcasts while mobile, or go into the archives and get some historical podcasts.
Guys, as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with us each and every episode. And until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odom and Steven Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.